Hello everyone and welcome back to Beyond the Veil Tarot and Astrology. My name is Candice Marie. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I'll be your astrologer this week and this is the very first astro weather for the year 2026. I'm excited to be back, wishing all of you guys a very happy new year, and I'm hoping that 2026 brings us a lot of clarity, a lot of growth, and some magic to all of our lives. Now, a few quick love notes before we kind of get into the video today. As many of you guys know, I'm going to take you through the transits day by day and help you navigate what's going on this week. But please do like and subscribe to the channel. Click that bell button below so you get alerts to see my other videos. I'm here Tuesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, and Sundays using tarot and astrology to make sense of what is going on in the cosmos. Any interaction with the channel really helps it grow, so I appreciate you guys. And don't forget to drop your rising sign in the comments below. Let me know, what is your guys' New Year's resolution? Where is all this action going on in Capricorn in your chart? I do read all the comments. Sometimes I'm able to get back to them, but I appreciate you guys for leaving them. And this Friday, we're going to be doing live readings on the channel. So I will actually be doing full moon readings that are going to be taking place. And it's going to be live on Friday at 6 o'clock p.m. Central Time. That's going to be 4 p.m. Pacific and 7 p.m. Eastern. I hope you guys can join us. It's always a good time for the Friday lives. All right, well, I mean, obviously, we're just going to see a continuation of a lot of planets that are going to be moving through Capricorn, and that's really going to be the long and short of the very first 3 weeks of January 2026. But this week carries a bit of like a more kind of serious, ambitious tone as the Sun, Venus, Mars all kind of cluster together in Capricorn. Now, this is obviously going to be really emphasizing the Capricorn area of your chart. Capricorn is a sign that's all about discipline. It's also about long-term goals and really building solid, long-lasting foundations. Now, I think emotions are going to run deep with this approaching full moon in Cancer. Obviously, if you guys haven't checked out that video, definitely watch it. It is on the channel. But this is going to be a full moon that's really highlighting the themes of home and family. And it's also going to be really touching on emotional security and some of the wounding that can kind of come up on an individual level. Well, now we will also see Mercury entering into Capricorn. That'll be happening on New Year's Day, just after the Mercury-Neptune square. So you guys might want to set your New Year's resolutions actually later in the day on January 1st versus at midnight. And when we see this shift, our mind is actually going to be shifting more in the direction of practical planning. So this is perfect timing, I think, for setting intentions that may last all year long. I'm expecting a mix this week of determination, some introspection, and I think it's really great for kind of restructuring our habits this week. Just watch for some stubbornness or some emotional kind of opposition along the way. Now, we're going to be talking all about Mercury and Capricorn. If you guys have been following along, we've already kind of talked about what happened with the solstice chart. We talked about Mars and Venus moving into Capricorn, and now Mercury is going to be entering into the sign this week. So starting on January 1st, 2026, around the later afternoon, at least here in Central Time, I'm here in Texas. So adjust your time zone, but it's going to be around 4 p.m.-ish on the 1st that we're going to see Mercury enter into Capricorn. So if you happen to have a Mercury ruled chart, if you are a Gemini or a Virgo rising, definitely pay attention because your chart ruler is on the move. And this will be impacting my Capricorn sun, moon, and risings as well. Now, in astrology, different planets represent different things. So obviously, you know, Mercury is going to be strongly tied to anything that deals with communication. So think emails, text messages, anything that deals with gadgets. This is also about thinking and learning. And it's also connected to travel and commerce or trade, business. And Mercury has a tendency to influence how we process information. It's also connected to how we speak. It's about kind of connecting to new ideas and kind of keeping an open mind. Now, Capricorn, on the other hand, this is cardinal Earth. It's the 10th sign of the Zodiac, ruled by Saturn. So Mercury, as it kind of goes through this sign, it's going to be bringing up tones or communication styles or themes revolving around structure, long-term planning, right? Think of like the goat climbing the mountain. This is also about ambition, whether that deals with our career or our ambitions out in the world. And because it's a Saturn sign, it's also about authority. It's connected to responsibility, discipline, and anything that deals with tradition. So because it's an earth sign, communication is going to be a little bit more earthy and also pragmatic for the next couple of weeks as well. Now, what this transit is going to feel like, basically, you know, serious, focused, and that's adding a little bit more oomph this week as we see Mercury meet with Venus and the Sun and Mars in the same sign. So there's definitely going to be a huge emphasis on kind of getting serious and making some long-term plans in that area of your chart. So pull up your chart, take a look at which house Capricorn is in. That is going to be the primary focus for the better part of like the next 3 weeks, not just because of Mercury, but the other planets that are moving through there as well. Now, it also feels that we can be, I think, a little bit more focused, and we can be a little bit more strategic when Mercury is in this sign. Capricorn is a sign that's also known for being realistic, and we can find that conversations are a little bit more strategic while Mercury moves through Capricorn. This is where thinking turns more in the direction of goals and also our careers. It's great for you know, business-related meetings, anything connecting to also discussing or kind of making long-term plans. And usually Mercury, when it's in Capricorn, because it wants to deal more with things that are contractual and more things that are like more serious discussions, it's less ideal for kind of casual chit chat. So you'll find that it's more kind of getting to the point, focusing on, you know, how we can kind of arrange or get something in order. And it doesn't feel as social when it's in this sign. However, in spite of that, I think that Mercury being in Capricorn on the first of the year, I think is going to be really, really significant. And I'm not a big fan of New Year's resolutions personally, but I do think that some of the resolutions that we set on the 1st of January might actually stick this year. And the reason being is because while Mercury's in Capricorn, it's going to be really supporting practical, achievable goals, especially around health or habits, because Mercury is associated with the South Node in Virgo. So if we are wanting to structure new routines, if we're wanting to get back to the gym, if we want to adopt new kind of cleaner eating habits or focusing on productivity, maybe quitting old habits, making some schedule or job changes, or career changes just in general, I think we're going to be kind of approaching some of these New Year's resolutions with a sense of strategic planning. Now, I think also with like Saturn, which is obviously Capricorn's ruler, direct in the sign of Pisces, and at some point we will see quite a few sextiles that are happening from planets in Capricorn to Saturn and obviously Neptune in Pisces. It's going to represent this sense of going, you know, we're going to finally push through this invisible wall, or where we've had trouble getting out of bed, or where we've been afraid to make changes, or where we've been kind of confused. And we're really tapping into that kind of spiritual side of Pisces with Saturn and Neptune in the same sign. It talks about vision boards, manifestation, meditation, a strong spiritual practice. Maybe it's going to be about our dreams and like really turning them into a reality and not being or not willing to kind of like give up. So I like this. I think that we're going to have a little bit more discipline. We're going to have more follow through. But also we're tapping into what our gut or intuition is kind of telling us as we're kind of navigating this, you know, kind of Capricorn goat party that's in the sky. Now, the other thing to think about is that with Saturn being direct, it's also going to add a little bit more emotional maturity. You know, Capricorn is known for being ambitious and wanting to be out in the world and, you know, getting recognition. But I think with Saturn and Pisces, it's about also kind of realizing that we don't always need the recognition. We can do a lot of the right thing or the responsible things behind the scenes, and we're not necessarily so much focused on the credit. It's more how we feel when it comes to standing up and kind of being a leader out in the world. And so doing things that are maybe not necessarily going to be as visible, but those results will eventually, you know, yield as we're kind of getting into the new year. I also think that, you know, this is about really working in some compassion and obviously, like I said, intuition to kind of help us build some of these new dreams in both the Capricorn and Pisces area of our chart, but do so realistically. Now, Mars and the Sun and Venus are also in Capricorn. And something that you guys are going to see from about the 6th of January all the way through about mid-month is we're going to see a really rare and unusual conjunction. I've talked about it a little bit. I'm going to do a video on it as we get closer in this next week. But this Capricorn stellium that's kind of building throughout this week, this means that, you know, Mars and Venus and the Sun are conjunct. And actually Mars and Venus are going to be combust all week. The positive, I think, of having all these planets in one sign is we can get a lot of work done in that area of our chart. And it also, you know, when we see a stellium, this is, you know, energy that is very potent. It will amplify, I think, with the Sun moving through there, ambition, Obviously, Mars moving through there is going to be very busy, and we're going to see Venus moving through there, which is going to give us a lot of passion. It can also be really good for major kind of upgrades when it comes to our careers, our statuses, and our values. So it's really great when it comes to action on goals this week. Just watch for some of the power struggles, watch for burnout. Obviously, mid-January, if you guys watch the horoscopes, I talk a lot about how when these planets start coming into opposition with Jupiter, we're just going to feel emotionally just kind of stretched. Now, Mercury is also the dispositor of the South Node, and I think that this is really important because Mercury transits, they move pretty quickly. We see Mercury spend about 3 weeks unless there's a retrograde in any one sign. And Mercury is essentially kind of the connection to the South Node in Virgo. So it represents, obviously, with the South Node, you know, how we communicate, how we process information, how we handle everyday details, and also kind of core Virgo territories. So what it's doing is, as it moves through Capricorn, it's really revealing how these South Node release themes are manifesting out in the world, right? And it can also mean the mental habits that we are going to be purging as well. I do think it's going to show us where we're overthinking, and we might have more of like a critical mindset. That's kind of been the theme of the South Node in Virgo, and how we're restructuring to kind of support some of this Piscean growth that's coming in with the North Node being in Pisces, the same sign as both Saturn and Neptune. And so we kind of shift from, I have to analyze everything, to like, no, I need to kind of trust the flow of what's going on. Now that connection during this period of January 1st through the 20th, where we see Mercury in Capricorn, it means that this more kind of ambitious, structured, disciplined energy is going to amplify Mercury's more practical side. So it's perfect for like realistic planning, setting long-term goals. And obviously for the South Node in Virgo, the structures that we're kind of releasing throughout the process, you know, it's a good thing. I think it's going to help us get more serious about letting go of feeling like we need to be perfect. I think we can actually let go of overly critical self-talk that doesn't actually allow us to move forward and make changes in our health, our habits, or our career. And it's going to really help us release unproductive routines. And I think a lot of it's going to be health routines. It's going to be work routines. It'll manifest a number of different ways out in the world. But for you personally, I think that this could be really wonderful because I think it'll allow us to release this kind of rigid, you know, mental framework that usually we see with the South Node in Virgo. Capricorn's realism can actually really help identify where some of this kind of Virgoan overanalysis can actually cause stagnation. So think like endless to-do lists without room for intuition or kind of letting the universe intervene. This is also great for having a practical mindset and doing some karmic cleanup. So this transit is great for kind of auditing our habits, maybe decluttering mental or physical spaces, in particular, anything that deals with your offices or, you know, where you kind of get work done, and also setting boundaries against worry and avoiding kind of falling back into some of these like rigid patterns. And so I think we want to avoid harsh self-judgment over kind of like, you know, failing, and we see it as something that didn't work, we surrender, and then we kind of regroup. Now it will help us build, I think, sustainable habits, and that's also not just eating our, you know, our leafy greens and, you know, doing our laundry or going to the gym. I think it's going to be using that kind of discipline that Capricorn has and integrating it into like the Pisces lessons. So we're going to plan spiritual practices like art, meditation, better rest, and really integrate that while releasing the need for them to be perfect. So if we can work with this, if we can also look for some of the communication shifts that are going to be happening out in the world, thoughts and words become, I think, very powerful. And in some ways, we can be more cautious or more kind of authoritative when Mercury's in Capricorn. But I think the positive is that we're releasing this kind of nitpicky tendency in conversation. So we're opting for being more sympathetic, being more emotionally available, and just kind of listening to other people. So overall, what you guys will probably find at the end of this transit in late January is that this Mercury in Capricorn is more of a kind of structured surrender. And it's using discipline and obviously thinking to kind of release some of these kind of Virgo shadows, making space for more of the Pisces faith. So New Year's resolutions like this week, I think are really going to feel quite grounded. You know, with Mercury in Capricorn, it's going to help us kind of commit to releasing these old patterns before we start something new. And we're also building new intuitive, you know, kind of practices. Maybe we're being more compassionate with ourselves and other people. And definitely watch some of the transits when you see some of the aspects, like when Mercury will sextile the North Node around the 8th of January. That's when you're going to start seeing things that are going to kind of align, where we're building and kind of bridging together logic as well as spirit. You'll see a lot of those sextiles that are going to start happening this week with planets that are sextiling the North Node. So it's going to be kind of hard to miss the Capricorn and kind of Pisces area of your chart. To make the most of this transit, I would say definitely focus on setting clear, realistic goals and plans. I think that's the only thing, if there's any takeaway, it's that. And that means being realistic with timing, not trying to do it too quickly, being mindful of what old habits need to go so we can kind of initiate something new, setting up timelines, being mature, taking responsibility, all of that stuff. And for many of us, because Capricorn does have this association with work, status, career, our reputation out in the world, our reputation, when it comes to not just in the workspace, but how authority figures kind of view us and our relationships sometimes that we can have with parents as well. So yes, we can focus on career and long-term projects. I think that will really thrive for the next 2 or 3 weeks. So we can communicate a little bit more professionally. Maybe we're editing and tweaking things before we're speaking. But I think that the core of this, it's really going to be about building habits and doing it with patience. That's, I think, one virtue that Capricorn definitely has. They're willing to kind of slowly climb their way to the top. And we'll find that with Mercury and Capricorn, that small steps can actually lead to big results. So I would say to you guys, rather than getting so overwhelmed in the, here's my New Year's resolution, I need to make it happen in the first month, set realistic goals, break it down into seasons. If you have a goal that you want to achieve by the end of the year, maybe do a check-in that's going to be in April, and then do another check-in that's going to be in June, and another check-in that's going to be in September. And then by the end of the year, you will have accomplished that goal. So we're going to have to think about it in like the long term, not necessarily the short term. I also feel like, this is about possibly, allowing us to create outlines. Maybe we're going to be journaling for, what the plan is ahead. And it's not just all work related. I think that there's this real need to kind of release the past or any emotional blockages, spiritual blockages, fears, issues also with not getting enough sleep or not getting enough rest. I think that's like a huge theme with Saturn and Neptune and Pisces. So definitely realize that you can't be burning the candle at both ends. And if you do that in January, especially some of the oppositions to Jupiter, a lot of us are going to feel very emotionally overwhelmed. Now, out in the world, because Capricorn deals with big business, top-down structures, governments, anything connected to like CEOs, leaders, that type of stuff, there will be over the next 2 or 3 weeks this increased focus on government. We're also going to hear lots of themes about stuff that's heating up with the economy or what's going on with structures out in the world. I want you guys to keep in mind that while all these planets are moving through Capricorn, Saturn, which is now conjunct Neptune direct, is kind of calling the shots here. And it may mean that we're going to see certain long-standing people in positions that are going to, start to kind of melt away or dissipate, or they're going to hide, or they're going to be evasive, or we're going to see some big businesses that might be going under, or we might see some major changes that's going on with like government structures and people who have been kind of serving for a long period of time. I also think that there could be some pretty serious discussions around leadership as well as their policies and some of the reforms and things that are kind of taking place. Obviously, Capricorn, will highlight authority figures and kind of institutional changes, but Saturn and Pisces is going to be flavoring a lot of this. So it could be anything from prison reform, Pisces rules prison, breakthroughs in regards to drug classification, changes in regards to healthcare reforms, anything revolving around major topics connecting to borders and institutions. Also, this is about like what's going on with like the global world, global leadership. So you're going to see lots of shifts going on revolving around where certain leaders are going, revolving around faith-based practices or laws or regulations that are kind of tied to immigration, border policies, that kind of stuff. And all of these planets in Capricorn are going to start sextiling North Node, Saturn, and Neptune right before we go into what will be the Saturn-Neptune conjunction in February, which is radically different, I think, than what we've seen in Pisces. It seems like things have been a little bit more confusing. Things have been a lot heavier, emotionally for a lot of people. And we're going to kind of get this thrust into the cardinal fire that's going to be happening in mid-February, which is very similar to some of the stuff that we saw taking place last summer. So it's very night and day when we see this shift. To me, it feels like it's like the last gasp of like the old ways, that you may see some, leadership, you might see some like military, kind of flexing and things that are kind of happening right before we see some pretty significant shifts that are going to be happening about the next 6 to 8 weeks. I'll leave it at that. But, you know, I do think that for a lot of people, they can also be kind of feeling like, you know, they are questioning whether or not they should be pushing or they should be trying now that Saturn and Neptune are kind of direct and conjunct in Pisces. And I would say, if your body's telling you to rest, rest. And if it's not time to be pushing through it, then don't be pushing through it. And, you know, rather than feeling like you have to do everything the first month of the year, really, like I said, the small steps are what's going to make it, in consistency and commitment to knowing your own personal and physical or even emotional boundaries, I think, is key. And if we know no boundaries with Saturn and Neptune conjunct, it's really going to kind of hit us like a ton of bricks. So take your time. I've always loved the old kind of belief that it takes, you know, like 21 days to make or break a habit. And I would say start there. You know, if you feel like there's something that you need to kind of change, give yourself that, especially if you're really implementing a lot of this, you know, checking in kind of quarterly with yourself. I think we're going to find that as we're getting into, you know, kind of April of this next year, it's going to be gangbusters. And we're going to see a lot of people with, you know, Aries season this year, Saturn and Neptune, Mars going through Aries, who are going to be a lot more independent, a lot more self-sufficient. They are going to probably also be a lot more physically and mentally kind of in balance as we see those conjunctions that are happening in Aries. Or, you know, we wait until we get to the spring and then that's just kind of thrusted on the collective. So just some food for thought. Now, I want to take you guys also through the personal predictions. I will take you through the 12 rising signs at the end of this video. So if you just hang tight, I'll tell you what it means for your sun, moon, or rising sign. But just generally, personally, I would say now is the time to get organized. Mercury loves to kind of break things apart and clean it up and put it back together. And I think with Mercury and Capricorn, and there are so many people who are hitting the job market right now that are trying to find jobs, that are, you know, reviewing resumes, trying to apply, going to interviews. I would say good time to be doing it. I think the first 3 months of January is going to be gangbusters for a lot of people. Granted, it might be about getting out of your comfort zone, putting yourself out there, or for some, just even getting back into the office. And some of the oppositions to Jupiter might mean that some people are having to now go from, you know, these kind of work at home protocols. Now they're going back to work. Others are going to be considering or contemplating relocating for work. Not a bad idea. It depends on your personal chart, obviously, but I would say if it's not that, you know, we can use this Mercury transit to review our finances, you know, change career paths, really update some of our health routines. And I think resolutions feel very grounded and very achievable. And I think we might see a lot of people getting into hiking. I think we might see a lot more people who are kind of doing colder winter sports or skiing. And that's just because of that kind of mountain kind of connection to, you know, the 10th house in Capricorn and the MC, that a lot of people are going to be really focusing on. Hey, I'm going to get out there, I'm going to be physically active, or, you know, I want to make some big changes. And I want to start meeting some people and telling people that, you know, I quit my job, or I'm changing jobs, or, you know, I've been let go. And so now I can really kind of go out there and have the passion and the energy and the wherewithal to like make your dream happen. And I think some of us might look back if they are going through job changes and realize that that was actually a good thing, and it was the catalyst for change, because it gave a lot of people the opportunity to really go after what it is that they truly wanted to do. So there can be some blessings in disguise for some of you guys who are having some professional changes right now. So I would like to also take you guys through the transits that I think are going to be most important while Mercury is moving through Capricorn. Like I said, it's going to be from January 1st through the 20th, 2026. And I want to show you guys New Year's Day, okay? So something that you guys are going to see is Mercury as it's leaving Sagittarius, which obviously we know how that can be. It can be overly optimistic, sometimes, you know, a little scattered, can't see all the details, but still it's adventurous, it's great for travel, great for learning. We actually start New Year's Day with Mercury square Neptune. And so I say this every year, but whenever I see hard aspects between Mercury, which could be, you know, flights, especially in Sag, it could be cars traveling, it could also be about some kind of news or something that's breaking, nothing really makes sense. Like nothing is really clear, because Neptune represents something that's been hidden, or something that has been concealed, or something that can be false or kind of deceptive. But this can also represent weather events. This could represent, you know, issues with flooding, or issues with significant storms that are creating a lot of kind of chaos in the airports. So not a fan of physically traveling on January 1st. And then with Mercury square Neptune, unfortunately, we see a lot of issues with drinking and driving. That's pretty common. And I'm going to double down on that, seeing that the moon is going to go through Gemini, which is obviously a sign that deals with driving and communications and kind of gadgets. And it'll square the north and the south node, and then it'll eventually swing and start coming into, until like the second or the third, an opposition with Mercury. So why am I bringing the Mercury square Neptune up first? We go into the new year not really knowing how next year is going to be and kind of questioning whether or not everything is going to work out. And Mercury in Sag is connected to Jupiter, which is retrograde in Cancer. Obviously Neptune is connected through Pisces to Jupiter. And Jupiter being retrograde basically says that there is a sense of us really needing to reevaluate at 21 our beliefs when it comes to our home and family, our beliefs when it comes to our roots, where we come from, the past, our land, the countries that we kind of live in, and a major reevaluation of laws, I think, regarding property, real estate. That could be everything from like a state level. That could be also a reevaluation that's going to be happening across the board, I think, for home prices and some major changes that are coming for, I think, the housing market. And I also think that this is representing a lot of people maybe having a bit of anxiety or confusion in regards to, well, what exactly am I, going to be manifesting this year? And if you fall into the Mercury-Neptune trap, you can fall into a situation where you're kind of worried or you're confused and you don't know what you want. And I would just say, do not set your New Year's resolutions at midnight. The magic is waiting until Mercury gets into Capricorn. So we see Mercury move into Capricorn, and that is going to happen on the 1st, but it's not going to be happening at midnight when everybody's going to be cheersing each other and all excited about what's going on. It's going to happen around 4 p.m. Central. Now, still, there's some stuff happening, Mercury, and we'll talk about this, but Mercury is directly connected to the moon in Gemini that day, which will come into a square with Saturn and Neptune, which is also saying, I don't know if I should travel. I don't know what I want to manifest. I don't know how to communicate. I don't know what I want. I think that if you guys can wait until later in the evening on the 1st, you can set your intentions on the evening, or you can do it around the time of the full moon, which is going to be in Cancer. I would actually say doing it, late on the 2nd or at some point in the morning on the 3rd. Those New Year's resolutions are going to stick a lot better because you're going to see the conjunction coming in with Jupiter, which is going to help us really reevaluate our emotions in our home. The moon's going to trine the North Node in Pisces, and you now have Mercury at a 2 in Capricorn. So you heard it here. Set your New Year's resolutions if you can. I would say probably on the 2nd or the 3rd. I think they're going to stick better. Write them down. Let me know what you guys think. Give it a couple of months and see what kind of manifests. But on the 1st, when Mercury moves into Capricorn, we automatically shift to this like practical kind of mindset. And it's after, like I said, that square to Neptune, which is really about, I think, kind of dispelling some of the illusions and then moving into a direction where we have a little bit more clarity. We have a little bit more faith. Now, things are going to be pretty quiet. You're not going to see too much going on until about the 8th. But around the 8th of January is when Mercury is going to start coming into a sextile with the North Node in Pisces. Okay? Friendly sextiles that's kind of leaning on and kind of bringing attention to the Pisces area of the chart, which Saturn is in, and it's kind of ruling all of this. Look at all this Capricorn energy, guys. So when Mercury sextiles the North Node, it means it's also trining the South Node. So these are friendly aspects. Obviously, Mercury coming into this aspect with the North Node, I really feel like opportunities are just going to feel more aligned. Communication is going to feel more aligned. Destiny supporting is very much the North Node. Communications and ideas, Mercury and Capricorn. So thoughts are going to flow more towards growth and also some kind of spiritual purpose, some kind of spiritual alignment. Maybe we feel like just our intuition is just kind of like on fire around that time. We will also see closer to the 14th that Mercury is going to oppose Jupiter. Oh, man. At a 19, okay? And 19 is always kind of deal with relationships, partners, spouses, legal matters, things like that. So those of you guys who are, married or you're in committed relationships, this will be a day to watch. And Mercury in opposition to Jupiter, you've got this opposition, which is a Saturn energy. It's 180 degrees away from each other. So it's two planets that are at opposing sides, opposing, kind of planets. And Jupiter is retrograde. So that may actually lend a little bit more to the Mercury and Capricorn transit, as does the other stuff that's kind of going on with the conjunctions to the sun. But this is where I think there's this tension between practical details and kind of like big emotional visions. And I think a lot of us might feel a little overextended when it comes to promises. Maybe we're, kind of ignoring what's going on at home for what's happening at work, or vice versa. Maybe we're ignoring some bigger kind of realities that are kind of going on out in the world. And we can just feel like it's just communication overload, or people are too hyper emotional and they're reacting very strongly emotionally to something that's going on at work, or something going on with the government or with like leaders and some of their decisions. And I think it's going to be very law related. I think it's going to be a lot about laws. You're going to hear about a lot of laws that might be kind of reshaping certain countries, especially when it comes to like homes and families, property ownership, things that are also going to be relating to, population and like numbers as well, because Cancer does deal with like women and anything that's going to be connected to mothers. Now on the 16th, we're going to see Mercury come into a square with Chiron. And I said to a lot of you guys to pay attention, and I'll say it again this week, to pay attention to the full moon in Cancer, because you're going to see that opposition between, Capricorn and Cancer, and then the incoming square to Chiron. So these Chiron wounds keep coming up over and over, and Chiron's in Aries, obviously, and it's direct now at 22 degrees. So this is pretty potent because it can kind of represent for a lot of people where there's issues in communication with authority figures. There's people who are also, waiting to hear what's going to be kind of happening with government jobs. I think we can hear a lot of changes with government jobs, especially with the tie to the South Node. And this is really with the hard square to Chiron and a superior square, it's going to be representing that we actually have to heal through vulnerability, self-acceptance, being independent, and also being honest and direct with our communication. I think that there could be some potential triggers around self-worth or like taking initiative. But I do think that there's going to be some chance for breakthroughs that can be happening as well. This is a day to watch your words. In my opinion, this is a day to be mindful of, also who's kind of telling you what to do, or if you're getting some slack from a boss, or if you're getting some slack from a parent. Just a couple days prior, you'll also see Mars, the Sun, and Venus also squaring Chiron. And I think a lot of individuals are going to be like, oh my gosh, I'm tired. Like, what am I going to do? But once these squares kind of fade, things are going to kind of ease up a little bit. But the first 2 weeks of January is just like gangbusters. Now, towards the end of these transits, we start kind of seeing things that kind of get a little bit easier. We're certainly going to see some stuff that's going to be interesting, especially around January 18th. When we see Mercury that is coming into a trine with Uranus and Taurus. Now Venus will be trine. This is also kind of coming into this Capricorn new moon. Look at this, Capricorn new moon at 28 degrees with Mercury and Mars being there. So that conjunction in its own right is significant, because that's about kind of like words in action and what's going to be actually initiating or changing. And I think out in the world, you're going to hear a lot of leaders, you're going to hear a lot of countries that are going to be talking about changes going on with crypto. You might hear about some regulations with crypto. You might also hear about some big changes in regards to the bond market, or some shifts that are going to be happening where government's getting more involved with what's happening with big banks. But this trine to Uranus is actually friendly. So it means that, especially with Uranus retrograde, there is this sense of like having breakthroughs when it comes to our finances or personal values. At the same time, we're also going to see not just Mercury conjunct Mars and trines to Uranus, but we're going to see a sextile that's building now to Saturn and Neptune. So it will be making a lot of aspects January 18th. The new moon in January 18th is going to be quite interesting. These conjunctions at a Taurus degree, this new moon at a Cancer degree, all of these trines to Uranus, all of these sextiles to Saturn and Neptune. You're going to hear about a lot of like new government initiatives that will start to kind of be brought up around the end of January, and it's going to roll for about 6 months. Now, I do think that between the trine to Uranus and the sextile to Saturn, this feels innovative to me. It's about structured ideas that start to emerge regarding, how we deal with money, food, resources. A lot of it's also going to be in some parts of the world, how the government is reacting or responding to farmers. Those of you guys who aren't aware, there's a lot of protests right now going on in Europe, again, with the farmers, because of what's going on with laws that are kind of being made or brought forth with the EU that are going to be trade laws or proposals where they're going to be trading with like Argentina and other parts of South America, where they're bringing in produce, they're bringing in food at cheaper prices. Meanwhile, at home, they are creating more regulations, more limitation. They're trying to ban, certain fertilizers, or trying to limit them, tax them to death, basically making it almost impossible for some farmers that have been generational farmers to be able to continue doing what they're doing, grow food, and provide security for other citizens. And they're essentially being, replaced by something that's cheaper because of regulations and also because of relationships that they're having with other countries. So this is a good example, because this is also showing you the darker side of Saturn and Neptune, and that when some, major kind of government kind of strong arm situation comes in, where they're really focusing on dissolving any limitations and boundaries with other countries and working together. And in some ways it can be a good thing. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but in some ways it's not, because you see this sextile to Saturn and Neptune, so certain things are going to fall, and then you see this sextile to Uranus and Taurus, which will actually destabilize food production. It will make some countries more reliant on other countries, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens. But you're going to see a lot of drama revolving around probably protests in the next month, or people who are kind of speaking out about what's going on with governments that are just railroading people, and that's all over the world. It's not just in one particular country. Certainly, I think with Mercury and Mars, it could be about an attack on communication. Because this has that tie to Saturn and Neptune, it's going to be governments that are going to be basically saying, hey, you say certain things, you're tweeting certain things, you're talking about certain things on social media, you're gonna land yourself in jail, or you're gonna get a fine, or you're going to basically get canceled. We will make these things disappear. And so there is going to be some weaponizing, I think, of some of that stuff, and a lot of it is going to be tied to cultural related things, religious related things, and also trying to create this initiative of global unity. However, it's going to have some pretty significant physical and I think financial implications for some countries. So we'll see as it kind of unfolds over the next month or so. Now, on the 20th, you're going to see Mercury then come into a sextile with Neptune. And that's really the last big aspect. I always kind of chuckle when I see anything around 28, 29 degrees. Obviously, the new moon's around 28 degrees, so 29 degrees is that critical degree of Capricorn. And we've seen some retrogrades there. We've seen some conjunctions there in the past. We've seen Saturn, Neptune, Pluto there this last year. Pluto especially, but Saturn, Neptune in recent years. And that was really the time where you could tell that things were changing in the world, that there was this restructuring of order, and there was this really focus on, big business, and a lot of, I think, government collaboration with big business. So we're going to have a new moon there. We're going to have Mercury hit that degree. And then we see the sextile that's going to be happening, obviously, now to Neptune. So where Mercury sextile Saturn was going to be some new decisions that were going to be made in commitments, the sextile that you're going to be having to Neptune is intuitive, it's compassionate insights. We can definitely blend that energy of Capricorn, which is very realistic, with that inspired kind of creative or spiritual side of Pisces. But this is critical degrees, guys. And so if you look at what's happening here, something's also going on around January 20th as the sun is ingressing into Aquarius. It'll come in conjunction with Pluto. Venus will conjunct Pluto. This will be the moon moving through Aquarius. And it's really setting the stage for then that shift of all of that Capricorn stellium into Aquarius. And we all know that February is a big month, right? So this is the last final gasp, I think. I think that, long-standing businesses, structures, authority figures, is going to do whatever they can do, which may seem, on one hand, kind of crazy with the Saturn-Neptune sextiles. On the other hand, it might be stuff that's more, to me, and this is just my personal opinion, it's been this agenda that's oh, we're doing this to make people safer, or this is what we're doing. And it seems out of safety and security and protection for people. So it's easier maybe for people to digest, or maybe some people are asleep and they don't see it. But they're going to start realizing very soon that there is some stuff that's kind of being put in the works that is going to be making, I think, a lot of individuals' lives very different in 2026. I cannot stress that enough. So I'm curious to see what happens then on the 20th when Mercury goes into Aquarius after it leaves Capricorn. Still a Saturn-based sign traditionally, but we touch, as a modern astrologer, I touch more on the Uranus figure, but that will be an interesting ingress as the sun conjuncts Uranus. Mercury conjuncts the sun, and it's all also ruled by Uranus, which is retrograde, and the moon is squaring. There's about to be some big changes with power. It's just very obvious to me, and that'll be the day of the Cazimi. So the Mercury in Aquarius transit is actually going to start with a cazimi. Even if it happens, it'll happen on the 21st, but you're going to see that happen at 1 degree. So obviously another video for another day, but we have this shift when Mercury goes into Aquarius where it's much more about, okay, we've set the ground rules, now we're about the future, we're more innovative, much more forward thinking, and detached in communication. But my message to you is get your shift in order. Do it now before we get to the Mercury ingress and really a lot of the other planets going into Aquarius, because that's going to be pretty significant. So we'll do those videos as we get closer. Obviously, if you are a Gemini or Virgo rising, definitely pay attention because your chart ruler is on the move. Capricorn placements and risings, you guys are going to have obviously a whole theme that's going to be going on, but definitely a lot more communication and kind of feeling outspoken. And I'll take you guys through the 12 signs after we do the week ahead. Okay. So let's talk about what's going to be happening this week. And we're going to be starting, I believe, on the 28th. So let me bring this back to 2025. And as you guys are waking up in the morning, you are waking up to a moon in Aries, okay? So when the moon's in Aries, we're looking at Mars. And naturally when the moon's in Aries, we're more energetic, we're more impulsive. There is this can-do, me first kind of energy. And the moon has already come out of overnight a square with Mars. There's already been a little friction that looks like it was kind of brewing last night on Saturday. So hopefully y'all are good. But the moon kind of playing off of that Mars in Capricorn, Mars is exalted. Now the problem is that you are going to see just shortly after last night, early morning's moon square Mars, where there's been some tension, maybe there's been being too driven, too work focused. And also we're going to see the moon come into conjunction with Chiron today and then square Jupiter. Okay, so if you have anything in like I would say, 20 to about 22 degrees of the cardinals, definitely wear a helmet today. Things can feel a little intense with this lunar transit. Moon will conjunct Chiron right here around December 28th. And that'll be around 5 p.m. Central Time. And just before that, it's going to be 4 o'clock squaring Jupiter. So the late afternoon today, basically, is what you guys need to really watch for. There's no major transits. Nothing else is really making any aspects. There's nothing going on that is entirely too important. But I do think this is going to be one that's going to create a bit of like a fiery kind of vibe. And Aries is very much like, well, what do I want? What am I doing? And it almost seems like our own personal wounds, or if we have headaches or migraines, or if we're feeling under the weather, it's being kind of like exaggerated a bit, and it might be connected to emotions or kind of feeling like there's like a post-holiday hangover or, like too much time with the family. That's square to Jupiter. So watch for that in the late afternoon today. The daily vibe for me, I think is leaning into that moon trine Mercury. If you can be teaching yourself how to heal yourself, if you can be being more optimistic, if you can be leaning into working with a teacher, a mentor, taking a class, taking a workshop, reading a book about, being independent, being brave, fitness, anything. I mean, obviously Aries is very much connected to kind of fitness and movement. It's a good day to learn about some of this stuff, and that might help offset some of the Jupiter squares. And honestly, as somebody who has an Aries moon, I've got Jupiter in Cancer, I've just noticed sometimes there are just times where I'm just like, I just have to go and do something on my own. Otherwise I get overstimulated, and I'm just like, it's easier if I do it. And that does kind of relieve some of the pressure of like the home and family demands versus like independent time. So from a native person who has this, you may feel like you have to kind of go your own way today. I would say to navigate, today's astrology, really channel the energy into something that's going to be personal. And I don't care if it's a personal project, if it's a hobby, if it's just running around, getting errands done, if you're going to the gym, if you're working out. Obviously, thanks for taking me with you. I appreciate it, Sunday crew. But we might find that as we get into the day, later in the day, if there's any kind of excess, there's gonna be something that's gonna flare up, and that could be excess, action, excess agitation, excess work. Remember, it's playing off of Mars and Capricorn, that it can just bring up this stressor that we're gonna continue to see into January about kind of feeling like we're being pulled in two different directions. I would say watch for impulsive arguments, because that can happen. And like these arguments can come up on Sunday because of overdoing something. And so the overdoing it is more going to be tied to the moon, because the moon's the dispositor of Jupiter. So like, are we, You know, like finally getting sick of our, you know, the old ways of doing things? Are we, you know, feeling like we're not getting the support that we need? So we need to kind of give it to ourselves. Find a way to give back to yourself on Sunday. I think that's going to be the best way to kind of navigate the 28th. And then you're going to have that trine to Mercury, which looks like it's going to be the strongest in the early kind of evening hours. And then that's pretty much it. So that's going to take us into what's going to be the 29th, which will be Monday. And when we wake up in the morning, the moon is in Taurus, at least as of about 6 a.m. Central Time. So a totally different vibe. With the moon in Taurus, we're focused on money and pleasure and food and resources and indulging and like, you know, security. So financial things, cooking things, gardening things, aesthetic things are really great when we see the moon move through the sign. Now this is going to be connected to Venus, and we will actually see the moon come into a square with Pluto first thing in the morning. So it's a little uncomfortable at first. So that's going to hit right around 10 a.m. Central. And then just after that, then the moon is going to, in the afternoon, start coming into a trine with Venus. And then it's also going to trine the sun. So outside of like the kind of late morning kind of beef that we have with Pluto, pretty good day on Monday, actually. I'm really kind of digging that moon's exaltation, the trine to Venus in Capricorn, which is great for anything connecting to relationships, money, you know, negotiating, you know, new wages, maybe some business changes for some people, business relationships. And then the sun and the moon are going to trine, and then the day kind of finishes up with the moon starting to come into a trine with Mars. So it's a very productive Tuesday. Obviously, when the moon's in Taurus, we feel more grounded. And so I think that with like the trine to Venus, Sun, and Mars, it brings harmony. It brings harmony with, you know, things being in flow out in the world, at work, you know, with coworkers, financially as well. And we feel very productive. What you want to watch for is that the moon is going to be making that one square to Pluto first thing in the morning. So I think with that square, there's definitely going to be like a sense of there being some tension. And, you know, first things feel kind of steady and productive. I think if you guys are focusing on staying grounded, I think it could be, I mean, great. There can be some drama in regards to the financial world early in the morning or anything revolving around the markets or things that are going on with banks. But I think with the trines to Venus, it kind of softens some of the flow. And then as the day goes on, we will see the Venus trine around 4 p.m. Central. We'll see the sun and the moon trine around 8 p.m. And then over the evening hours into the night, the moon will trine Mars. So it's almost like some of the best productivity and the best flow on Tuesday is kind of happening from 4 p.m. on. So that's Central Time. The other thing that's happening in the background on Tuesday is we are going to be seeing that there is going to be a Mercury Saturn square that's kind of building. So it's really kind of hanging around, you know, pretty much like, you know, in the middle of the night. So when this is happening, you guys may feel it building up all day on Tuesday on the 30th. Tuesday is not my favorite day for signing contracts. It's also a day that you have to be really mindful that there can be travel delays, there could be weather delays, there could be issues revolving around communication, signing contracts, agreements. Even though the moon is flowing, you know, throughout this week, we'll see that Mercury square Saturn where there's going to be some difficulties in communication, some setbacks maybe with wiring or sending money, especially kind of like internationally, because it's in the sign of Sagittarius and also Pisces, and it's at a Taurus degree. So you guys are, I mean, you know, I don't watch a lot of like mainstream news, but we're going to hear some stuff about stress in the markets, I think, particularly like liquidity issues. And, you know, Mercury can be about people who are like analysts and then are looking at what's kind of going on, you know, with like all the charts and the numbers and the figures. And then the square to Saturn is like, oh, yeah, actually, this doesn't look so good, you know, and it's funny because it's all connected to Jupiter because these are both Jupiter signs. Well, Jupiter's exalted in Cancer. That's why I think we're seeing silver running so much, you know, and I'm not a financial advisor by any means or an economist, but the fact that we're seeing silver doing some of the stuff that it's doing, I think that somebody might start to let the cat out of the bag and be like, guys, this is kind of like signaling there's a bigger problem here. You know, if silver's running and gold is running. But I think we're going to see some major headlines in regards to silver over like the next week or two. Anyway, But that's connected to Mercury being at a banking degree, Saturn being at a banking degree, and they're squaring, and it's retrograde. So it's saying like certain countries are, maybe going to be, buying up silver or reserving silver. Or they're going to be making some changes to what's happening with like the banking system, which I think is inevitable, at some point over the next 2 or 3 years. All right. So other than that, the other transit that we are going to see, let's see, that's pretty much it. So maybe some of the lingering, energies of Mars sextile the North Node. I mean, that's kind of hanging around as well, which I like. I think that Mars sextile the North Node, which really kind of started building up on the 29th and it goes into the 30th. It's also trining the South Node. So Mars, action, motivation, in Capricorn, dedication, the ability to get a lot of stuff done. We're releasing old drives. And I think really what we're doing is we're kind of like aligning more with like our destiny. So what you guys really want to focus on, I think on the 30th, is just be persistent, be practical when the moon's going through Taurus. If you need to do financial things, if you need to negotiate things, realize that even though there's like an agenda to get business and money moving, there is going to be some either hard negotiations or there's going to be some, some delays. And then Mercury will come in and square to Neptune. Just shortly after that. I also think that this is really great for finishing tasks and kind of grounding out your emotions. So on Tuesday, it's just important to like stay patient and really focus on long-term stability and not be trying to kind of like figure everything out right away. Okay. All right. So let's continue to look at the rest of the 30th. So that starts in the middle of the night. Then we wake up and the moon is coming into a sextile with eventually what is going to be Jupiter. So this will be on the 30th, kind of late afternoon, which is really great for anything connecting to building, architecture, things that are connected to money and like finance and also real estate. And then you're going to see that the moon is going to then start sextiling Saturn and Neptune in the evening, and then it will conjunct Uranus. So I think that the moon conjunct Uranus happening in the late hours of the 30th, I think that this is probably going to be just some kind of shock or surprise. And obviously this is all playing off of like Venus, which is up here in Capricorn. And remember, Venus and Mars are within 10 degrees of the sun. So they're combust all week. So we can feel like there's just way too much going on with, the Capricorn kind of area of our chart. I also think that when that conjunction to Uranus happens, it does look like that's going to happen overnight, at least where I am. Yeah. And it looks like overnight it'll conjunct Uranus, and this goes to the 31st. So this will be New Year's Eve. And then it's going to be sextiling Saturn and Neptune. So there's some stuff going on like overnight on the 30th into the 31st. And I do think it's going to be very much connected to like financial news and stuff like that. And then that's going to take us into Wednesday. So on Wednesday, we wake up, moon, if you're an early riser, the moon is still in Taurus. It's the late degree. Okay, so it's sextiling Neptune. And then boom, it goes into Gemini. So most of the day is going to be in Gemini on the 31st. And this basically means that, we're chit-chatty, we're getting out, we're meeting people, or maybe we're learning. Maybe there is some focus or emphasis on traveling, short distance travel, car trips, car rides. And now we're looking at Mercury. And Mercury is obviously a bit debilitated in Sag. It's in its opposite sign of Gemini. And if you look at this, Mercury is now coming out of a square with Saturn where there's been some difficulty in communication or agreements or, seeing people's perspectives, or there's been some delays. And now Mercury is coming into a square with Neptune. And this is where I would say be very careful, guys, if you're going to be traveling. I think with Saturn and Neptune, there could be a lot of ice on the road. I think we could see some really significant cold fronts that can be coming in. We could also be seeing some people that are having some real issues with the Mercury connection to the South Node, with lung issues, inflammation, people kind of getting sick, especially traveling around the holidays. I mean, that's kind of expected, but that I'm not crazy about that. And I feel like a lot of people with some of the squares, I think we also saw one. I think Venus was square Saturn around Christmas time. I've heard from a lot of people, they're like, yeah, like we just wish we had stayed home, or we wish that, like we hadn't gone out and done things. And so you're going to see something similar with Mercury square Neptune, that people are going to be kind of deciding whether or not they're going to want to go out and if they're going to want to do something over, the holiday for New Year's. Now, the Mercury transit is going to continue, and we'll watch that for about another day or two. Moon's not going to do much on the 31st. It will come into a trine with Pluto. So that can be great for calling people, hey, you know, Happy New Year, what are you doing? Let's plan something, especially if it's friends, neighbors, siblings that are kind of getting together. So you have some good communication transit early in the morning on the 31st, and then you start to lose it. And it comes out right around noon. And then the moon is going to continue to move through Gemini. It also looks like the sun is going to sextile the north node in Pisces, so that's really good. It's the similar transit as like the Mars sextile. We are just taking action into releasing and letting things go. And I think it's also some people being like, I just want to get through, you know, like the new year, and then I'm going to be focused on work. Like I want to be present. I want to rest. And I've heard a lot of people saying that. They're like, I just don't even want to think about the next year yet. I just want to, you know, kind of wrap this up, finish up what we've been doing, and then we can really fully kind of step into 2026. At the beginning of the year after the holidays have happened. So I think that, yeah, some people would really benefit from that. Now the moon's going to square the north and the south node. That is literally happening right at midnight, at least where I am, Central Time. And so interesting that it's at a 10. So 10s obviously represent Capricorn energy. So long-term planning, strategy, authority, you know, your career, your status, your reputation. And the determination, I think, is like another quality of the 10, and like with a lot of work. So the fact that that's squaring the north and south node, I'm going to keep reiterating this, be very careful. Mercury square Neptune at 29, you know, moon square the north and the south node. Do not be like, take Ubers home, or if you choose to stay at a friend or family's house, or if you get a driver to pick you up, great. But be very careful with drivers on the road. I think we're going to hear a lot of issues about drinking and driving. I also think that there's potentially going to be some kind of leaked information or news or documents or data that is getting overshadowed by, oh, there's major issues with the airlines, or oh, there's like this big storm that's coming through a certain part of the country, and there's going to be some move to kind of try to sweep under the rug a story or manipulate something, and you know, people are going to be still kind of hazy from New Year's Eve, you know, and then most people are going to want to hang out and just kind of chill on the first. That people are going to be so consumed with just recovering from the night before that they may miss what can be some very important and very big headlines. And I think it would be news that would be breaking literally right around the time that most people are waking up. Gemini 10. I want to see what that is. This was not in my notes, guys, but that seems to be really significant with Mercury squared the north and the south node. All right, so Gemini 10. Which would be 11. What is the degree exactly? 1055. So just for the useless file, Gemini 10 is a airplane falling. The keyword is crisis. And I don't say this to stroke fear. Okay, that's not why I'm telling you guys this. But like being in airports around New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, I've seen people who have this degree, the Sabian, in their real life, and it's always like I've noticed when planets ingress over that particular degree, or there's a retrograde there, if there's a square there, it's like there is a crisis, and then it's like, well, how do we handle it, you know? And this is tying into Mercury square Neptune. Like I have seen, and it's manifested in this last month, planets going through Sagittarius, squaring, you know, Saturn and Neptune and Pisces. It's been like what happened in Australia, where, you know, people got attacked and they got stabbed, or we're seeing that there's, you know, lots of intensity and there's a lot of conflict, and a lot of media that's also kind of stirring the pots in regards to, you know, culture differences and religious differences. And like, to me, this doesn't feel safe on New Year's Eve, personally. So do what you want with that information, but I will read you guys Gemini 10 only because I think it's so pertinent to this square. So Gemini 10, free fall. The symbol is to diving into an experience without hesitation or any thought of failure, with the attitude that whatever difficulties or problems encountered can be resolved, and they will when they arise. The image of an airplane falling it falls under one of the reverse symbols, but it illustrates the concept of unclutch and let go. What can't be comprehended from one point of view can be understood from another. On a practical, it suggests relaxing, going with the flow, and being willing to risk or take a chance. It also alludes to the fact that over-control and fear limit opportunity. At its highest, it represents learning through doing, and an intuitive knack for handling crisis competently. Watch for helplessness, lack of self-direction, and defiant attitude or refusal to get involved with anything that requires effort or risk. The accent is on impulsiveness, diving into an experience. You may have to take coercive action to deal with some unexpected crisis. Your greatest advantage lies in keeping your head and concentrating on the task at hand and going with the flow and staying calm. Guard against panic. Avoid the temptation to bail out or quit in defeat before the situation has a chance to get to right itself. Stepping stones would be crisis, downfall, collapse, decrease, descent, plunge, breakdown, failure, drop. Okay, but I'm going to read you guys 11, but just something about that, I'm like, So Gemini 11 is a new path of realism and experience. The theme is practical involvement. The symbol speaks to an expansion in awareness and understanding through involvement in everyday activities. It also speaks to the advantage that can be gained from being flexible and open to experimenting with different ways of doing things, or even starting over if present methods aren't working. This applies. The image of a new path of realism in experience was described in 1931 in the mimeograph version of the Sabian Symbols as a new real estate subdivision is revealed with wide paved streets. In light of the fact that Mark Jones mentioned that Elsie Wheeler was chosen to channel the degree images because she was not burdened with an abstract mind, and the description is an abstract interpretation or description rather than concrete image, it is possible that the image described in the earlier versions is what Elsie actually saw. The emphasis in this degree is on objectivity, keeping an open mind, looking at all sides of an issue before determining the values of things and the basis of what works and what is useful. It alludes to the necessity that all individuals frequently and honestly evaluate their personal skills and resources in light of those that are needed to obtain goals and objectives. At its highest, the symbol represents remarkable ability to adapt to a new situation and foresight identity and acquire the necessary information and resources required ahead to use them, navigate. Watch for denial of reality and refusal to acknowledge or deal with anything regarded as unpleasant or stressful. I'm going to read that again. Denial of reality and refusal to acknowledge or deal with anything regarded as unpleasant or stressful. And I remember New Year's last year. I remember seeing the news and the stuff that was going up with the cars and the things that Tesla stuff was blowing up, and we were also seeing that all those people got injured and or killed, and by getting hit in New Orleans in a crowd by a car. Similar stuff. So, and I don't say this once again to scare you guys, but I do think that what's interesting about this degree is that it says the accent is on objectivity. You may decide it's time to take matters into your own hands and change the direction of some situation. So this is where it plays into, I think, like okay, this hasn't been working. It feels like a crisis. Got to make a change. Helping kind of influence what we're going to be doing, I think, with our New Year's resolutions. Your greatest advantage lies in taking a practical approach, analyze the situation, gather information, use the right tools to get the job done. Watch against psychological denial, refusing to face reality. Look the other way when will only make matters worse. The stepping stones are opportunity, new beginnings, practicality, objectivity, functionalism, experimental, fundamental, and pragmatic. So something's going to come up, some conversation, some kind of perspective, some kind of shift, questioning narratives, questioning direction, and then it's going to break. And you guys are going to see as we then go into the first, so this will be Thursday, so this is New Year's Day. I would say before that happens on New Year's Eve to kind of like make the most of some of the transits, knowing that the North Node and the Sun are going to sextile. This is really kind of aligning some of our resolutions, I think, with growth. I think on the 31st, it's about watching for some of the unexpected plot twists that can kind of happen when the Moon's conjunct Uranus, staying curious, staying social. And I think, being open to change and just try to be flexible on the 31st and try to embrace, being more kind of flexible with changes of plans, and obviously celebrate with an open mind because that Moon's going to be in Gemini. Now we wake up on the 1st, unless you guys pull an all-nighter, and the Moon is still moving through Gemini. Now we're going to see it make some pretty unusual kind of aspects here. So now Mercury is square Neptune. I could definitely see a lot of people who are expected to go to work, like calling in sick or hitting the snooze button or, having some delays with travel. So that's kind of hanging around. I do think that's going to get exacerbated a little bit here as the moon starts coming into an opposition with Mercury, right before Mercury actually changes signs. So that's going to happen in the afternoon hours. And we're going to see the moon start coming into a square with Saturn and Neptune. So that's around 3 o'clock. So the positive aspect that's going to happen today, in spite of some of these mutable squares, is that the moon is going to sextile Chiron and Aries. So this is great for, using our words to heal, doing some journaling. If there has potentially been, a conversation that you need to have, maybe you're thinking about it, you're writing it out, you're reflecting on stuff, and feeling a little bit more confident about being able to address it. Usually when the moon's going through Gemini, driving, walking, writing, learning, these are kind of themes. But it does seem like with not only the square that happened earlier to the north and south node, but then on the 1st when it's starting to square Saturn, where there's going to be a delay, and then Neptune, which will go, I think, into the next day, there is a sense of being like, do I say this? Do I not say this? Like, should I be traveling? Should I not be traveling? Do I post on social medias? Do I not post on social medias? There's probably going to be some people who are going to be traveling in like secret and like not knowing where people, not wanting people to know where they are, not wanting to be like tagged. Like I could see some drama over that, or just not knowing how to respond to certain people. And all of this, once again, tying back to Jupiter, I think is a lot of people who are like, no, I stayed home for the Christmas. I'm staying home for New Year's. I'm not going anywhere. I'm staying in. And this shift where people are trying to focus less on what people see or what people think, and more on kind of prioritizing what's best for them emotionally, or for their home, or their family. It does look like shortly after this, then we're going to see on the 1st, Mercury is going to enter into Capricorn. So that'll be in like the early evening hours. And then in the later evening hours, the moon starts coming into a square with Saturn, and it looks like it'll square Saturn and Neptune overnight, depending on where you live. So as it's doing that, it's definitely going to be a little bit easier to kind of navigate, because moon square Saturn, emotional disconnection, difficult time finding the words, especially in Gemini. Moon square Neptune, not knowing how we feel, how do we connect, what do we believe in, what do we say. So I could definitely feel like there are some people who are putting a real emphasis on, well, who am I hearing from on New Year's Day? Like, who is reaching out to me? And Gemini is neighbors. You can find that there's neighbors that are more kind of out and about, or they're trying to kind of connect or see how you're doing. And some people are going to be shut in, so that's square to Saturn and Neptune, and other people are going to want to get out and about and kind of hang out with people. So I think that with Mercury leaving the square from Sagittarius to Pisces, and then going into Capricorn, like I said, New Year's resolutions are definitely, I think, going to stick a whole lot better. I also think that, what we're really going to be focusing on the 1st is, being more communicative. I think we're going to be a little bit more optimistic. I think we're going to be more mentally sharp or ready for some of these new beginnings. This is the time where then you start thinking about, okay, well, what practical intentions am I getting ready to set? And, knowing that we're then getting ready to come into a full moon, you don't necessarily need to do it now. You can write some things down and you can meditate and reflect on it. I have actually found that when planets go through Gemini in this last 2 years and it squares, Saturn or Neptune and Pisces, it's been me being like, nope, I need to think about it before I say anything. I need to sleep on it, or make sure that that's actually really what I want to do or what I want to say. So you can get into that mindset, I think, on the evening of the 1st, and then be kind of preparing some of your intentions that you might actually launch on like the 2nd or the 3rd. So let's now focus on, how we're navigating the 1st. Just like I said, set those practical intentions, communicate thoughtfully if you can, and then we're going to take this into what will be the 2nd. So look, if you see this overnight, it's squaring Saturn, and then it's going to square Neptune. This is also showing some kind of shift in the media, or the narrative in the media. And now that Capricorn is here, you're going to see a lot of politicians kind of pandering. You're going to see leaders giving big announcements and speeches. You're going to see CEOs that are making big announcements about things. And 0 degrees of Capricorn, it's a world access point. So it's going to be probably more larger companies announcing that they're having layoffs or they're cutting jobs. I hate to say that, but that's pretty much, especially the South Node at a 10. And then, you've got Venus and the Sun and Mars trining the South Node. You're also going to hear, I think, leaders or CEOs of people coming up and talking about what their initiatives are, what they're going to be doing, and how they're planning on kind of leading. So the moon will square Saturn and Neptune in the early morning hours of the 2nd. It will come into that square with Neptune around 6 a.m.-ish Central Time, and then it's going to break into Cancer. So around most of the time people are actually getting up, getting on with their day, the moon's going to be coming back to its home sign, and that'll be on Friday. So the challenge here is that now the moon is coming into, the degree where it's another cardinal point, and now we're building into what will be a full moon, which will actually take place kind of in the middle of the night, early morning on the 3rd on Saturday, the next day. So we start feeling the buildup of this full moon pretty much immediately. And what you guys are going to see first thing in the morning on Friday is that the Cancer moon is at home here. So it wants to be doing domestic things or checking in with family, or it wants to be kind of focusing on emotional security and keeping like a low profile. And it's going to oppose Mercury and Capricorn. Okay, so Mercury and Capricorn's like, I don't care, get the job done. Figure it out, like this is what we have to do, like have the paperwork on my desk by the end of the day. And then the moon in Cancer is like, I really just want to go home and take a nap, or I really just, something's going on with my family, I need to prioritize that. And so it's at a 1. So it's like, are you going to lean into your emotional instincts, or are you just going to kind of power through and focus on that Mercury and Capricorn? What will happen here is that there is this tension between emotional and kind of practicality, and there is going to be a sense of feeling like you can't appease both sides. And I want you guys to observe this on the 2nd and on the 3rd, because it's setting the precedent for the rest of January. Now, when we get out of that opposition, which is not great for communicating your emotions, talking to your family, talking to your boss about family-related things, like, we're just going to see some people that are going to go, I had one thing that kind of sent me in one direction, one thing in another, right around 9 a.m. And then that's going to subside a little bit. And then later in the day, the moon's going to come into a trine that evening with the North Node overnight. Okay? So most of us will be sleeping. But for those of you guys who don't know, we're going to be having that new moon, very, very early morning / middle of the night on Saturday the 3rd. I'll get to that in a second. But overnight, the moon trine the North Node can be really potent for being home, dreaming, paying attention to your intuition, getting in touch with your emotions, doing some kind of reflection practice. And I would be doing that, if I were you guys on Friday night, going into Saturday morning, because most of us aren't going to be awake when we're having that full moon. Now, the next aspect that's going to be made is going to be the moon coming into an opposition with Venus. And then we're going to see the full moon, and then the moon is going to oppose Mars. So that's a lot of cardinal energy that's going off all at one time. So before we segue into Saturday the 3rd, what you guys need to know is that you're feeling the full moon that's building all day on January the 2nd. We shift when the moon's in Gemini to Cancer to this kind of, chatty to more emotional, kind of nurturing, family focused kind of emerges. And to navigate, your guys' transits on Friday, I would say, balance the head and the heart. Easier said than done, but that's what we have to kind of learn how to do throughout this next month. Nurture relationships. Don't let work kind of like dictate or determine, what's going on with you emotionally or at home, and like don't let it get in the way either. And then we will see that big full moon come in, and that will be at 13 degrees. So it looks like it's going to be around 4 a.m. Central Time. I think it's like 4:10 or something. And I did a video on that if you guys haven't seen it. Full moon in Cancer at home and in the same sign as Jupiter, but the moon's in opposition to Venus. So we kind of feel like something emotionally is like at a distance from us or we're yearning for something. And then the moon is in hard aspect to Mars, and Mars is exalted here. So that's also kind of saying like there's a lot of work to get done, and we're reflecting on how that kind of makes us feel. Anyway, you'll see the ping pong between the two houses. Definitely check out my horoscopes because I talk about that. Now this is going to take us into Saturday. So when we wake up, we are still feeling the effects of the full moon. And trust me, guys, you're going to feel it, especially with the moon in opposition to Mars first thing on January 3rd. I mean, I think we're going to be hearing I think there's going to be some really big news going on with silver. I've thought that for a very long time, the first week or so of January. And then also the fact that you're going to see, Mars in Capricorn, it can deal with mining. So it can be like mining companies making big news. It can also be that we're hearing like certain governments are kind of, making moves to secure and kind of stabilize banking and markets. And they're going to start kind of forecasting potential changes that could be happening with not just the economy, but the real estate industry. And then the moon will come out of an opposition with Mars where there's some tension that releases. And then what you're going to see on Saturday is that the moon will conjunct Jupiter, making everything feel really big. So this is like the post full moon kind of like expansion. And this is about emotional purging, changes and transformations. Even though Moon Jupiter is like very joyous and jolly and happy, Jupiter is retrograde. So we'll be like, oh, we overdid it, or something has been overdone, or there's been too much. And then boom, it's going to square Chiron. So that's where, you know, too much emotion, too much home and family overwhelm, too much, you know, housing related issues just creates a lot of personal wounds for people. And 22 is that kill or be killed, AKA it's a Capricorn degree. So there is this sense of there being some kind of like potential military conflicts, which I think you're going to see anyway with like Mars and the Sun. You know, you're going to be hearing a lot of people being like, oh, they're like totalitarians, or, you know, they're doing this or they're doing that, or they're dictators. Like you're going to hear a lot of people talking about that. But the truth is like with Saturn and Neptune and Pisces, on the surface, it seems like there's like a lot of like cultural divide, or that there's like a lot of like religious, you know, divide, and there it is out there. But this is also about things that have been manipulated, distorted, or concealed. So people are watching TV, believing everything they're hearing on or seeing on TV, when in reality, some of the operations and things that are actually going on, there's going to be more than what, you know, is on the surface. And so you have to kind of take some of the stuff that comes up in this next week with a grain of salt, especially with Mercury square Neptune. You're going to be like, I heard this happen in this country. And it's like, we don't know because we don't understand the language, quite literally, Mercury square Neptune. Or, you know, we're not from there. We don't understand the history or the context. And so a lot of things can be manipulated to create some uproar, and things can also be instigated to almost in a way give certain leaders or certain authority figures more reason to assert their authority and then take certain rights away, right? As crazy as it sounds, but that's what can happen. So I would be watching to see, well, is there stuff going on that's involving protests? Is there stuff going on involving people who are pushing back against, you know, what leaders are saying they should do? You know, Capricorn is people also in uniform. So is Virgo, Mercury and Virgo. So sometimes it's going to be about, you know, civil servants. Sometimes it's going to be about cops. In recent years, you know, when I think back to like the Black Lives Matter protests and stuff, we were seeing tons of stuff that was going through Capricorn. And obviously it became about, you know, this whole thing that happened regarding around police brutality that was kind of brought into the spotlight. So we're seeing similar transits. And the differences this time around is that there could be major physical or financial repercussions with the trines to Uranus. And we're also going to start seeing those sextiles to Saturn and Neptune, which is creating a precedent to either hide or conceal, you know, what the true agenda is, or it's creating a situation where, you know, people are being kind of stirred up because what they're watching and what they're consuming, and then it creates that conflict, and then people, you know, go to jail or people lose their rights. So it's not all going to be peaceful, especially when you're seeing like Mars and Venus combust all week long. All right, so staying on the 3rd, so you'll see that emphasis on, you know, Moon, Jupiter, expanding, you know, emotions and anything that's going to be kind of dealing with home and feelings. But it's been in opposition to Mars, and now it's coming into a square with Chiron. And that's all happening in like the evening hours of the 3rd. So what you guys are going to find is that there's a lot of heightened feelings on Saturday. There's joy mixed with tension. There is this feeling revolving around, you know, needs versus ambition, obviously. It's a day to release emotional baggage. I think that if we can focus on kind of nurturing ourselves and others, and also kind of honoring our vulnerabilities, we can kind of move through some of this personal healing, and we can kind of really get into the core of like what's been bothering us emotionally, and we can start to kind of clear it out. But easier said than done. And, you know, Chiron now direct and not 22 makes me feel like it's going to be long-standing home and family kind of issues that might have been hanging around for a little while. All right, so the moon's going to keep going through Cancer. It will start to come over night into a trine with Saturn, so things kind of emotionally stabilize a little bit more. It'll trine Neptune, so there could be some good dreams that could be happening on you know, Saturday evening into Sunday morning. And then we're going to see the moon move into Leo, which will be happening around 8 a.m. on Sunday the 4th. And obviously when we're looking at the moon in Leo, bright, right? This is about creativity, joy, romance, drama. and it will immediately oppose Pluto. So there is definitely going to be a little bit of tension there next Sunday morning. I do think it'll be brief. The connection between the Leo moon is the sun, and if you notice this now, the solar kind of conjunctions where the 6th through the 11th is just going to be gangbusters, you're going to start feeling that. Sun conjunct Mars, driven, powerful, assertive, but it can also feel bossy. It can feel demanding. It can feel overwhelming. It also can feel like it's just somebody's like kind of hovering over you, And then the Venus combust too. We feel like our minds are on fire with relationships or money-related issues. And all of this is feeding off of that Saturn and Neptune. So there's a lot of people going, what is going on? What is breaking down? What's happening? I mean, it's not, don't take my word for it. Go and see a number of different like economists and stuff that are talking about what's happening right now. Like they're basically saying that there's potentially going to be some major issues with currency that's coming. And a lot of it's just, I think, because, we have major devaluation with the dollar, and obviously we've got never-ending kind of like money printer and things that are going on, that what we're looking at is not just like a blip in the radar. It's going to be something that's going to impact everybody globally. So perhaps the writing is kind of on the wall, and I think it's going to start to kind of come out slowly, but once it starts to slowly kind of trickle out, it'll be then everything at once, and that'll basically be February through April. So be paying attention to the directions, the moves, the statements that, federal and local, politicians and leaders are kind of going in, where they're talking about initiatives. Pay attention also to what major CEOs and business players and things like that are doing out in the world, because I think they're going to make some comments about what they're doing. Definitely seen some, billionaires that are talking about how they're doing currency conversion, and they're, taking some of their US dollars and they're exchanging it for like, other countries' dollars, because they have concerns about what's going on with America. And I kind of agree. If you look at the United States chart, they're kind of they're on their own next year with Saturn and Neptune going in the 4th house. But I do think that once we get past this Moon-Pluto opposition, which the irony, it's going to be at a 2, so may very well be some financial news or things that are kind of coming up, on a Sunday, but it's like banks are closed, So then we move to the moon starting to come out of that opposition later in the afternoon. The moon's not really going to be making any aspects to anything. It's pretty unexpected for the most part. So, I think that there's not really a key transit. Certainly now by, the end of the day on the 4th, Venus, Mars, and the Sun are about as close as they've been. And then the 6th to the 11th, they'll be moving side by side. So that combustion is starting. So for some people, there's a lot of passion, there's a lot of drive, there's like a lot of work that's being done in a certain area of your chart. But be mindful of those Jupiter oppositions, which are going to be playing out next week. I think on Sunday, there's a lot of deep emotional shifts happening while that moon's in Cancer. And then obviously the morning kind of kicks off with it, moving into Leo and opposing Pluto. This is going to show where there is definitely going to be some, more creative, dramatic, compassionate, kind of sparring type energies. I think this is about embracing empowerment on Sunday. I think this is also about kind of releasing that tendency of needing to go with the crowd or following other people or being extreme. It's also about releasing control issues and like really stepping into creativity. And so looking at this from the perspective of, okay, the sun is 6 signs away, from the moon, we're taking action and getting creative with our health, our fitness. We're getting creative when it comes to making more time to do the things that we love, or we're embracing some of the changes that we're making with like our schedule or our lifestyle. So at least that's what kind of like Leo risings are going through right now. But that's basically the week in a nutshell. You will see the moon continue to kind of go through Leo. And then as we're getting into next week, we're going to start talking about this triple conjunction that's kind of building up. So I also talk about it in the horoscope, so if you guys are interested. So with that being said, let's dip into the Mercury in Capricorn transit. I'd like to talk to you guys about what that means for the 12 rising signs. As a reminder, I'm a Western astrologer, so I like to practice Western whole sign astrology. You're going to get the most out of my readings by listening to your rising sign first. So if you don't know your date of birth information, go over to astro.com, put in your info, time of date, birth, and location. Look at the 9 o'clock hour. That's going to be your rising sign. And this is going to tell you which house, Mercury is kind of moving through. I'm sure you already know because you guys have listened to some of the other videos with Mars and the Sun and Venus. And that will tell you what, actions are kind of happening or where the communication is kind of shifting in Capricorn. You can also listen to your sun or your moon sign as well. It definitely will resonate to some extent for you guys. And I'm a whole sign user when I do my presentations. I do Placidus on my private clients. So you may have to, if you use Placidus, look at where 0 degrees of Capricorn is and listen to more than one rising sign, okay? All right, so let's go ahead and talk a little bit about Mercury going into Capricorn, what that means for the 12 rising signs. And I'm gonna start first with my Aries and my Aries risings. What's up, Aries? How you doing? I think of like the Rihanna song, the work, 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 work. That's like your guys' life right now, huh? As an Aries moon, I feel that. Obviously, Mercury is joining the bunch of planets that are moving into your 10th house of career. This is also about your reputation. It's your public image. So if you're retired or you're not working, it's like, well, who am I out in the world? How do people see me? How do they perceive me? And with Mars being up there, there's definitely a lot of like, getting involved in something or being a leader or, like being a parent or just some kind of responsibility that you have. And really the Mercury transit through your 10th house is kind of like picking up some of the energy of where Mars has already kind of moved through your chart ruler. So this is going to be a transit that's really about kind of structured professional communication, right? And getting more serious when it comes to goals and also your legacy. Writing resumes, scheduling meetings, launching businesses, working on websites, having, contracts that you're negotiating. These types of things can be happening. And because Mercury rules your 3rd house, which is more about like communication, the mind, gadgets, emails, there could be a lot more emails, a lot more texts, phone calls at work. And also it's connected to your 6th house, which is dealing with, changes with your routines. Maybe you're planning routines, maybe you're managing employees, maybe you're managing your health or, focusing on, making some changes in kind of your day-to-day habits. And it's going to be also about networking. So as you go through this transit, I think what you're really manifesting is boss talks, promotions, reputation boosts, career pivots, new jobs, businesses that are getting ready to launch. And this is really a good time if you're an Aries or Aries rising to just put yourself out there, get out there in the world and mix and mingle with other professionals. Maybe it means you update your resume. Maybe it means that you're getting ready to launch a website. Maybe you just spruce up your LinkedIn. And this is really about showing up in the world, speaking with authority. And I really would recommend you guys setting quarterly career goals. I think that would be really beneficial for you to just set that intention and then be checking in with yourselves, especially if you're an Aries rising in the spring, because there's going to be like a sense of you getting a lot of work done and then being like, okay, do I like what I did? Do I want to keep doing it as you're kind of getting into April of 2026? All right, Aries, good luck. Let me know what happens with that Mercury transit. All right, my Taurus and Taurus risings, you guys are going to be experiencing Mercury going through the sign of Capricorn, moving through your natal 9th house in a fellow sister Earth sign. So this is friendly for you guys. I know a lot of my Tauruses and Taurus rising, so they're traveling, they are going back to school, they're writing, they're teaching, all that kind of fun 9th house stuff. So knowing that it's moving through, Mercury's moving through your 9th house, the same house where Venus is moving through, this is telling me that the heart and the mind are both kind of coming online with like the same belief system, the same purpose, the same agenda when it comes to travel, education, like legal matters. Now, the 9th house is about your beliefs as well. It can be about higher education, certification, graduation, ceremonies, that kind of stuff. And this is really where you're getting a little bit more serious about your philosophy and you're really learning something. You're also planning adventures. So, with that Mercury connection, Mercury rules your 2nd house of money and also personal value or anything connecting to your spending habits. It's also connected to your 5th house, which is about dating and romance and also children and like where your practical beliefs are kind of like aligning more with security and fun, where you're like, hey, I can have more fun. I can spend on travel. And I think you guys are going to be manifesting, study courses, publishing ideas. Maybe you feel like the travel plans start to solidify. College admissions can be a theme, and also some kind of shift in regards to maybe giving a presentation to a group of people. Remember, this is kind of ruled by the dispositor Saturn. So there's like this sense of you like going, okay, I'm getting ready to make a big announcement to a group of people, or I'm traveling to go and see friends. There is some kind of community engagement that's kind of involved in this. And also your long-term plans too, and like being optimistic about what's about to change. I would recommend for my Taurus risings to really maybe do some journaling about your core values. You know, reading nonfiction can actually be really beneficial for you right now, anything that's like educational. And maybe be thinking about planning some kind of like long-term investment, or be thinking about investing in education or traveling. I think that's a good way to use this. Good luck, Taurus. My Geminis and Gemini risings, what's going on, guys? Mercury, your chart ruler, is on the move. It's getting ready to change signs, and it's going to be heading into Capricorn in your natal 8th house. Now, obviously, you are ruled by Mercury if you're a Gemini rising. So having Mercury popping into the 8th house where there's already a lot of action definitely tells me that there's going to be some major transformations going on. Planets going through the 8th house, there's a transformation. Capricorn can be about long-standing financial matters, joint finances, career finances, debt, money owed to you, tax-related matters. And all of this is connecting to Saturn, which is now direct in your 10th house. So I think a lot of Gemini and Gemini risings are about to experience some really big changes in the realm of their career, or some really big changes in the realm of their partner's money or investments or joint kind of financial matters, or, you know, insurance, or like inheritance related things. If I were you guys, I would be tying in the theme of the 4th house, which is going to be about the home, family, or dominant parent. It's also going to be talking about where, for some of you guys, it can mean that, you know, home matters or personal matters get kind of strategic and you're reworking or rethinking something. Obviously, having Mercury in the 8th house is deep. It's about, you know, vulnerability and transparency and like psychological matters, and you can feel more investigative with Mercury in this house. And maybe you're really focusing on clearing debt, or, you know, being able to apply for a loan, maybe getting investments. And it can also be very kind of much about psychological changes or changes in your intimate relationships. I do think that a lot of you guys are going to have that if you're financially planning, you can have some really big breakthroughs, especially if you're waiting for money to come in that's been held up, or if you're getting like investors in a new, like, you know, venture or a business or something like that could be happening. I also think it's key time for like therapy insights with all these transits in your 8th house, and really focusing on building in joint ventures with another person, especially if it's going to be positively impacting or helping you segue in your career. I would definitely be reviewing your budget. I would be starting to get your documents in order and everything for tax season. Even though it's very early, I would be doing it basically like the next month, because you'll get it done pretty quickly. I also think that there could be a lot of opportunities for research into some stuff where you could have some breakthroughs. It's just really important to communicate your boundaries, I think, in close relationships while Mercury is kind of going through this particular house. Good luck. Definitely very financial with you guys in regards to that full moon too. All right, for my Cancers and Cancer risings, you guys are going to be experiencing Mercury moving through the sign of Capricorn, moving through your natal 7th house. Obviously for you guys, this is just very much kind of either relationship related. Maybe it's about sales and having a lot of like customers or clients. It can also be about a business partnership, or it can be about just an emphasis in going in the direction of a relationship potentially building or brewing. Now, when Mercury goes through the 7th house, there is this sense of more serious kind of discussions in your one-on-one bonds with partners. Maybe it's contracts, maybe it's commitments, maybe it's kind of make or break moments. But since Mercury kind of rules your 12th house of the subconscious, and also the 3rd house, which deals with communication, it's very likely that there can be these hidden thoughts that resurface in relationships, and it's giving you the opportunity to maybe get some clarity on where you stand in relationships. Maybe somebody who's been missing appears, or maybe you're kind of looking for someone and you're manifesting someone, and then you connect with somebody who kind of fits the bill. So I would expect opportunities over the next couple of weeks about relationship talks, but also it can be business. It's Capricorn, and there can be a lot of energy revolving around negotiations. Like you'll be able to negotiate with people a little bit better. Obviously all playing off of Saturn, which is direct in Pisces, also still somewhat in a trine to Jupiter in your sign. So I think a lot of you guys are going to be traveling with partners, meeting long distance people. Also, I could see some mentor kind of relationships going really well, maybe bringing in a business manager. It could also be really great for going any kind of like legal dealings or legal matters, because that sextile to Saturn is saying that things could actually work out in your favor. Obviously, depending on the time of when some of that stuff was kind of kicked off, but it does make me feel like even though other people are going to be kind of fighting and very passionate, that sextile to Saturn almost seems as if it might bring some kind of conclusion to like a long-standing legal matter. My recommendation is you know, focusing on what you're manifesting. I mean, Saturn is in Pisces, right? So relationship talks, business partnerships. And really, this is a good time to be clarifying expectations in relationships, or maybe listening actively, and also, you know, drafting agreements and like working and like partnering with other people will also be a theme, I think, throughout the next couple of weeks. Good luck, guys. Let me know what happens. All right, for Leo and Leo rising, you guys are going to be experiencing Mercury entering into the sign of Capricorn in your natal 6th house. A great place to have Mercury. Mercury loves being here because of its association with Virgo. So whether it's your health, your office space, your daily routines, your work, this is really a good time to be making practical improvements to your habits. If it's about wellness, or if it's about your workspace and organizing your office, or getting back to the gym, you know, taking care of pets, it can also be a time where it's feeding off of all of this energy with Saturn, which is going to be in your 8th. So it's about kind of organizing your schedule and also getting a little bit more active and really trying to focus on the psychological or the emotional benefits. It could also mean that there could be some changes going on in your workspace due to expenses, or you know, things that are going on with company budgets. That can happen as well, that there is like a sense of scaling back, but honestly, to me, it doesn't feel like the end of the world. Some of you guys may have the opposite, where you're actually moving into a bigger place, or there's something new that's kind of starting up work-wise, which I think can be really wonderful. And for you guys, you know, Mercury is tied to the 2nd house of personal values and resources, and then the 11th house of groups and goals. So really what you're doing is you're kind of aligning your routine with aspirations and also a little bit more security. I think Leo risings are going to be definitely like manifesting new fitness or kind of diet plans. I think they'll stick. Also, there's going to be more efficiency at work, maybe new jobs and things that also really get a bit of a boost. And there's definitely this sense of focusing on like either pet or service related matters. So if you're like in the service industry or hospitality, or you work with animals, or you work with health, this is maybe going to be kind of highlighted a little bit more for you guys. My tip for you, Leo, would be to just get organized, right? Organize your desk, you know, get everything kind of scheduled out for the new year. Track your habits, prioritize self-care. Do that realistically also, because it's not all about like all of this physical stuff. The full moon is going to show you where it's also about rest and taking time to kind of process the emotions. But with the sun going through this part of your chart, naturally, it's kind of showing you, especially this like real buildup and momentum where you're going to get into your groove as you're getting into, I think, mid-January. Good luck, guys. All right, we've got Virgo and Virgo rising. What's up, Virgo? Your chart ruler's on the move. Mercury is moving through Capricorn, fellow sister Earth sign, so it'll be trining you and making aspects also to the South Node in your sign throughout this transit. Obviously, I like this transit a lot for Virgo and Virgo risings. I think not just because it's necessarily your chart ruler, but the 5th house does deal with creativity. This is about romance. It's about children. It really touches on structured kind of sense of expression and getting a little bit more serious about having fun or being creative and like participating in things that bring you joy. So as Mercury goes through this house, it's tying into you and also your 10th house of career and responsibility. So it can mean that your professional and your self-image gets a little bit more playful, yet discipline boost. If you're self-employed or you're trying to turn like a side hustle into a side business, that might be like a real emphasis. You know, going public with relationships, putting yourself out there, you know, themes that are relating to also parenting can kind of come up for some of you guys. And all of this is playing off of Saturn, which is in your 7th house. So it can mean that if you're single, you're really committed and dedicated to trying to find somebody and kind of trying to find like the one, especially with some of the sextiles to the North Node. So if I were a Virgo or Virgo rising, I would say, you know, you got to treat dating almost like a job right now. You have to be like, I'm making the time. And the 5th house could mean you're going to theaters, you're going to where there's live music, you're going to bars. And it may mean that, you know, if you are in a committed relationship, you're going to be going and really trying to kind of like have as much fun as possible with a partner. And you're trying to integrate more togetherness and like, you know, kind of cultivating more romance and more fun and maybe even stuff that you could be doing with your kids. So I like this for Virgo risings. I like this for creative launches. I think that romantic commitments can deepen. A hobby maybe turn serious. And if you're wanting a tip from me, I would say planned artistic or creative adventures, you know, classes, dance classes, entertainment things, painting, that kind of stuff. romantic, connections can be happening. So date with intention and definitely channel some of this energy into things that really bring you a lot of joy. I think that's where you're going to see some of the best stuff that's going to happen throughout this transit. Good luck, Virgo. All right, my Libras and Libra risings, you guys are going to be experiencing Mercury entering into the sign of Capricorn in your natal 4th house of home and family. Libra, obviously Mercury ties to your 9th house, which is going to be more about your beliefs or travel or education, and also your 12th house, which could represent your subconscious and kind of spiritual matters or things that can be kind of like self-undoing patterns and kind of habits. So really, when we put that together, it means that you're really grounding into your beliefs about home and family. And strengthening your home base. And I think that that's already kind of on the agenda. Venus, your chart ruler, is moving through there. Obviously, if you're a cardinal sign, Aries, Cancer, Libra, you guys are either experiencing squares or oppositions. So you're really feeling, the pressure that's going to be building now all the way up until I would say like the 3rd week of January. My thought on this is for my Libra risings is that, what you're really manifesting with this is there can be family resolutions. We're moving, we're expanding, we're going to be selling, we're relocating, we're remodeling, that kind of stuff. It could also mean that there's renovation ideas. Maybe this means also that your emotional foundations are strengthening. I would be really, focusing on kind of discussing home and family plans quite openly. When are we moving? When are we traveling? What are we doing? And this is a good time to actually go through your kitchen because your 4th house is the kitchen. This is all feeding off of Saturn, which is in your 6th house. So it's cleaning up the kitchen, getting into a routine, maybe bringing in help or hiring help to deal with. It could be kids. It could be, cleaning. It could be, fixing things in the home, taking care of pets. It could also mean that this is a time that's very strong for you guys where you're just you're trying to ground yourself in your home. It's almost like Libra risings. They spend the very first period of the year getting everything in order, pretty much kind of like, December of the year prior to about March, so then they can really flourish for the rest of the year. So you'll see that, especially under like the full moon that you're going to have this week. I would be cleaning out my office, cleaning out an excess room, cleaning up a washroom, cleaning up a kitchen, clearing out closets. That's what I would be doing. And you can do that into, all the way into January. But I think that if you're doing that, you can kind of set new kind of like expectations at home and like you're really cleaning and decluttering things. So you're really feeling like you're grounded and you're ready for the new year to begin. Good luck, Libra. All right, for Scorpio and Scorpio rising, you guys are going to be experiencing Mercury moving into the sign of Capricorn, and it'll be moving into the natal 3rd house. Pretty important for you guys. Mars is moving through that house as well. So your mind is already kind of on the 3rd house topics. Mercury ties to your 11th house of friends, groups, and aspirations. And it's also directly tied to your 8th house of other people's money, finances, and resources. So Scorpio risings, you might find with Mercury in the 3rd house, there's more emphasis on websites, short distance travel, dealing with vehicles, talking to siblings, learning. And in this part of the chart, it's very direct. It's very focused when it comes to your mindset. It's great for writing and speaking. I think a lot of you guys could really shine here. I also think because of that kind of connection to the 8th and 11th house, really what you're doing is you're kind of transforming your aspirations and you're learning how to communicate things more clearly. Scorpio risings, I think, are manifesting some kind of productive learning. Maybe there is an emphasis on connections that you have to siblings or neighbors throughout this trip, throughout this period, and you might be taking some short trips or making some plans. And something I would think about is because your Mars, Venus is relationships, and the Sun is your career, there's going to be a lot more of you talking about people. Where are we going? What are we doing? And this is all feeding off of Saturn, which is in your 5th house. So if you're a creator and you're writing and you're putting content out there, this is really about getting serious about what you're creating. It could also mean that you're communicating in romantic relationships, what you're looking for, what you want, trying to get more of a defined kind of where do we stand in a relationship, especially when it comes to topics like, commitment or children with those planets that are kind of moving through the 5th house. Really strong for negotiating, I think, and like really being able to go deep in research and be learning a lot also about financing or anything that deals with investing. So Scorpio and Scorpio risings, I think, will do very well with that throughout this transit. And I hope you guys enjoy it. All right, so we've got Sag and Sag rising. What's up, Sag? You guys are going to see Mercury enter into your second house in the sign of Capricorn, which is all going to be about your security, physical, tangible things, money and kind of cash in the bank. When Mercury goes through the second house, it's picking up the energy of your 7th, which is committed relationships, clients, and one-on-one partners, and the energy of your 10th house, which is going to be more about your career, your status, and your reputation. So as Mercury joins all these other planets moving through your second house, your mind is on your money, and it can be a very strong kind of business period for you. I do think that that tie to the 10th and the 7th really talks a lot about the relationships, professional or personal, that's kind of like tied to your worth. So it's like, do I feel secure because I'm in a relationship but I have a partner? Do I feel secure because I'm working? And even though that South Node is going through Virgo, I think a lot of my Sag and Sag risings are going to see some actually pretty great financial or kind of like abundance related things that are going to happen throughout this transit. You might start to see it as early as the full moon in Cancer. But I do think that for you guys, this is about income ideas. This is also about shopping wisely, sticking to a budget, being very resourceful, especially because all of this is ruled by Saturn, which is in your 4th, which tells me that a lot of you guys are like, you know, I don't want to buy a lot of stuff because I'm not staying here long, or I'm saving my money because I want to buy a house, or, you know, I'm kind of planning to make a big purchase that's going to be going into family, home, or like property related things. You know, it could be furniture, it could be like a home expense that's also kind of coming up, but something that you want, and it's actually going to be aesthetically pleasing as well. I do think that I would be just really meticulously budgeting if I were Sag rising, because there could be a lot of money in and a lot of money out. I also think that that South Node connection means that there still can be some changes happening with your career and also your relationships, but I do think your mind is on your money with Mercury in your second house. Definitely affirm your values and really be investing in skills, okay? So it could be business skills, it could be skills that are kind of connected to things that you can do around the home, or things that are kind of connected to like property or real estate. Or even like home design related things. You might be like investing in doing a course, or, you know, getting high quality materials if you're going to be painting, or going to be like making changes to your physical space. Good luck, Sag. I hope it's a good one for you guys. All right, we have got my Capricorns and my Capricorn rising. So Mercury is in your sign. You guys get the megaphone. And it's going to be hard not to I mean, when Mercury's in your first house, so people hear you, but like for people not to hear you, see you, and just like watch you in the world, it's like all eyes are really kind of like on Capricorn placements the next like week or two. So in your chart, the first house is, first of all, what you do first thing in the morning. It's your appearance, it's your identity, it's how you present yourself, what your hair looks like, how you dress, and how you communicate, right? And Mercury is directly tied to work, health habits, and your routine through your 6th house. And then the 9th house of traveling, beliefs, higher education, legal matters, you know, teaching and traveling. So for you guys, this is interesting because I feel like this is really like this sense of serious personal expression is coming through. And it doesn't feel the typical serious, like Capricorn, you know, like Venus is there, so it's very persuasive. The sun is there, so you're just really transformed. Mars is there, so there's like a lot of passion and charisma, and you're just like really feeling like, hey, like it's a brand new me. And I don't know if it's just coming from a change in your mindset or like a physical change. Obviously, all feeding off of Saturn, your chart ruler, in the 3rd house, so you're feeling more incentivized to do 3rd house things. Write, speak, learn, travel. Also, it can mean about the relationships that you have with siblings or that you have with neighbors, and that you're kind of feeling a little bit more of like an authority figure, and you're learning where you need to kind of speak up for yourself. So this will likely manifest as, you know, major routines and like kind of philosophical shifts that are going to be happening. And I think a lot of you guys are going to find that these changes in your mental habits and your physical habits, your work habits, are really kind of redefining who you are. Now, some of you guys might see it manifest as a new personal goal that kind of emerges. Others are going to feel just more confident in, like, you know, kind of getting out there and talking to people. To me, it feels like a big rebranding energy, which I think is really cool. I know a lot of this is based off of changes happening in relationships or incoming changes that are going to be happening at home. And I also think that this is really a good time, if I was a Capricorn rising, to just be like presenting ideas boldly. Like, you're going to have people's attention. Yes, you can update your image, especially with Mars and Venus being there. But I think this is also just really about like kind of affirming your ambitions and like really being able to kind of talk to other people and share kind of your beliefs, because it can be really inspiring for other people. I hope that's good for you, Capricorn. Let me know, how does it feel to have the megaphone? All right, for my Aquarius and Aquarius risings, you guys are experiencing Mercury going through the sign of Capricorn. This is this goat party that's going through your subconscious, probably having some wackadoodle dreams. The 12th house, obviously, we know has associations with your bedroom. It could be about rest. It could be about secrets, things that are wrapping up or kind of closing or concluding. And it has this tie to, obviously Saturn, which is kind of the ruler or the dispositor of Mercury going through this house. So a lot of it's financial things, security things, because Mercury is tied to the 8th house of other people's money, and it's also the 5th house of romance and taking chances, or children or romance, and then hobbies as well. And then with Saturn being your co-ruler and it's influencing this, I think a lot of you guys are finding that there's a lot of introspective thinking behind the scenes. There's a lot of behind the scenes planning, strategically planning, career moves or changes going on with your finances or your security. I do think that this is also about having fun and like shared resources that are being processed inwardly, where you're trying to think about whether or not you're willing to take risks, whether that's in relationships or finances, and whether or not, you're kind of getting a feel for, what's out in the ethers. This is a period where I'd be paying attention to my dreams. I would be meditating. Divination and getting readings can be really fun too, when you have Mercury going through the 12th house. And I think that some of you guys are going to find that it's going to manifest as there being some hidden insights that are coming up for you. And, some of that might be beneficial if you're doing some dream journaling. It can help bring you some spiritual clarity. I think it's going to be about financial situations or self-esteem or like security related matters, because that tied to Saturn. And I really recommend that you guys be meditating and kind of journaling privately. I think it can be really beneficial to help you work through some blockages that you might have with like scarcity mindset. I think this is also about releasing mental clutter and just really trusting your intuition and some of the stuff that comes up. You may find that there's like ancestor connection. Like sometimes I see for Aquarius risings when there's like a lot of planetary energy in Capricorn in your 12th, you're like, I had a dream about my grandma, or like my great uncle, or like my mom or my dad came to visit me, and they reassured me that this, that, and the other was going to happen. And so if you are one of those Aquarius risings that's kind of feeling like lost, or you're feeling like there's some scarcity mindset or insecurities about stability, sitting in meditation and trying to connect with ancestors and asking them for guidance can actually be really beneficial at this time. Good luck, Aquarius. And my Pisces and Pisces risings. So you guys are going to be experiencing Mercury entering into the sign of Capricorn in your natal 11th house. The house of friends, goals, kind of parties, socializing, getting together with, friends. And Mercury's tied to your 7th house of relationships and partnerships, as well as the 4th house of home and family and the past. Very busy social time for my Pisces and Pisces risings. I think that maybe with the influence of Saturn on this transit, it's really going to be about structured social planning and like networking, not just for social reasons, but for professional reasons. And that direct connection to the 4th and the 7th really talks about your foundations and like your relationships trying to more or less align with where you're going in the future. So for many of you guys, this will manifest as like group projects. It can also mean that friendship connections can really deepen. Goals are manifesting. There is an opportunity to meet a romantic partner through a friend, or somebody is kind of potentially like playing matchmaker, or a friend could potentially be something more. Friends from the past can also kind of come back because of that connection to the South Node. And it's a lot of you maybe feeling like, okay, I have a lot of things that I'm wanting to kind of accomplish like socially, and then questioning like, do I have the time? Are these the right people that I'm aligning with? Really, I think aligning yourself with mature, successful, reliable friends is number one, and supportive communities. And then also like setting group intentions can be really great. Putting yourself out there on the internet, trying to network for business reasons, starting groups, joining groups, I think can also be really wonderful, especially if they're like kind of spiritually minded. So I think some Pisces and Pisces risings would do really well. Maybe joining like a hiking group that goes and meditates outside, or maybe deciding that they want to join some kind of like artistic or creative kind of association so they can kind of share their vision with other people. There has to be this like social aspect of it. And you will see with all these planets going through, I think, like Capricorn, as it starts opposing Jupiter, you'll find that there's this thing that you've been wanting to do or that you love to do. And if you are wanting to get more into it, you just surround yourself with people who are doing some of the same things. And that's going to really make your heart grow, because you're going to go, oh my gosh, they love these same things too. You know, I haven't had anybody to share this with. And like, now I can have this exchange. So definitely look for people who are going to have similar kind of interests. So that way you can really align your vision for the future. I hope it's a good one for you, Pisces. All right, guys. Well, thank you for joining me this week. Obviously, like I said, Happy New Year's. Definitely set those intentions. Just give it a little bit of a delay. Let the kind of the holiday hangover clear out. I hope Mercury in Capricorn brings us all clarity and success, especially when it comes to our future plans for next year. Please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Give me a thumbs up if you like this, and sharing is caring. I'll obviously be back throughout the week. You guys will catch me here on Tuesday and Thursday and Friday. So I'll see you soon. But other than that, I hope you guys enjoy your New Year's, and I will see you back here in 2026. Take care.